I sat across from Mark at our dining table, the evening light filtering through the windows, casting a warm glow over our cozy home. Everything seemed perfect, until he dropped those fateful words that shattered my world. "There's something you need to know, Emily." His voice trembled, and he couldn't meet my gaze. A knot formed in my stomach as I lowered my magazine. "What is it, Mark?" He took a deep breath, his eyes downcast. "We need to get a divorce." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. "What? Why?" Mark's shoulders slumped, and he finally looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "I've been in love with someone else for years. Her name is Heather, and she's pregnant with my child." Time seemed to freeze as his confession sank in. The man I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had been lying to me all this time. Tears stung my eyes, and a lump formed in my throat, making it hard to breathe. "How could you do this to me?" I choked out, my voice cracking with emotion. "To our marriage?" Mark's expression softened, but it did little to ease the ache in my chest. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant to hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie. I love Heather, and I want to be with her and our child." Anger flared within me, burning away the initial shock and hurt. "So what? Our 5 years together meant nothing to you?" He shook his head, his brow furrowed. "Of course they did, but sometimes love fades and people grow apart." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" Mark's gaze dropped once more, and he fidgeted in his chair. "A few years," he mumbled. My heart shattered into a million pieces. The man I thought I knew was nothing but a fraud, a snake who had betrayed my trust in the cruelest way possible. In that moment, something hardened within me. I would not be a victim. I would not let this break me. Mark had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. "Get out," I said, my voice low and steady. "Pack your things and get out of my house." Mark's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded and stood from the table, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our once happy life. As I sat there, tears streaming down my face, I made a vow to myself. Mark would pay for what he had done. I would make sure of it. The next day at work, I felt like a zombie, barely able to focus on the tasks at hand. The weight of Mark's betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders, and I knew I needed to confide in someone I could trust. During our lunch break, I caught up with my friend and colleague, Laura, in the cafeteria. As we settled at a table, she immediately noticed the dark circles under my eyes and my somber demeanor. "Emily, what's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Mark wants a divorce." Laura's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Why?" The words tumbled out like opening a floodgate of pent-up emotion. "He's been cheating on me for years with some woman named Heather, and she's pregnant with his child." Laura's hand flew to her mouth, her expression a mix of shock and anger. "That bastard," she hissed. "I'm so sorry, Emily. You don't deserve this." I nodded, blinking back tears. "I know. And the worst part is, he acted like it was nothing, like our 5 years of marriage meant nothing to him." Laura reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's because he's a selfish prick who only cares about himself." Her words rang true, and I felt a surge of anger coursing through me. "You're right. He is selfish, and he's going to pay for what he's done." Laura leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. "I'm not going to let him get away with this. He thinks he can just toss me aside and start a new life with his mistress? Not a chance." Laura's eyes narrowed. "What are you going to do?" "First, I'm going to hire a private investigator," I said, my voice steady and determined. "I need to know exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes. If Mark has been cheating for years, there's no telling what else he's been hiding from me." Laura nodded slowly, a sly smile spreading across her lips. "Good idea. We need to gather as much dirt on him as possible." "Exactly," I said, feeling a sense of purpose settle over me. "And then we'll use it to make sure I get everything I deserve in the divorce." Laura's smile turned feral. "That's my girl. We'll make sure that bastard pays for what he's done." As we finished our lunch, I felt a newfound resolve coursing through my veins. Mark had made a mistake, thinking he could walk all over me and discard our marriage like it meant nothing. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Later that day, as I sat at my desk, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I felt a cold sweat prickling at the back of my neck. Pushing through the discomfort, I made a mental note to schedule a doctor's appointment, just to be on the safe side. Little did I know, the real bombshell was yet to come. A few days later, I found myself sitting in the doctor's office, nervously tapping my foot as I waited for the results. The nausea and fatigue had only gotten worse, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When the doctor finally called me back, her expression was unreadable. "Well, Miss Anderson, the tests confirm that you're pregnant." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Pregnant? With Mark's child? The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. "Are you sure?" I managed to choke out, my mouth suddenly dry. The doctor nodded, a hint of sympathy in her eyes. "Yes, I'm afraid there's no doubt about it. Congratulations are in order, I suppose." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Congratulations? My husband just left me for another woman who's also pregnant with his child. This is the last thing I expected." The doctor's expression softened. "I understand this must be a difficult situation, but try to focus on the positives. You're bringing a new life into the world, and that's something to be celebrated." I nodded numbly, my mind racing with a million thoughts and emotions. On the one hand, the idea of having a child filled me with joy and hope for the future. But on the other hand, the fact that it was Mark's child, conceived during a time when he was betraying me with another woman, left a bitter taste in my mouth. As I left the doctor's office, I felt torn in two. Part of me wanted to embrace this new chapter, to focus on the love and nurturing that comes with motherhood. But another part of me couldn't shake the anger and resentment towards Mark, the man who had so callously thrown our marriage away. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of water and sank onto the couch, my hand instinctively resting on my still flat stomach. A million questions raced through my mind. How would I tell Mark? Would he even care? Would he try to use this as leverage against me in the divorce? As the hours ticked by, I came to a decision. I would tell Mark about the pregnancy, but not because I expected him to change his mind or come back to me. No, I would tell him because he deserved to know the full extent of the consequences of his actions. The next day, I steeled my nerves and called Mark, asking him to come over so we could talk. When he arrived, he looked uncomfortable, like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "What's going on, Emily?" he asked, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze with a steely resolve. "I'm pregnant, Mark, with your child." His eyes widened and his mouth hung open in shock. "What? How?" I couldn't help but scoff at his incredulity. "How do you think, Mark? We were still together when this happened, remember?" He ran a hand through his hair, his expression a mix of confusion and guilt. "But I thought, with Heather." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Save it, Mark. I don't need your excuses or your pity. I'm telling you this not because I expect anything from you, but because you need to understand the gravity of what you've done." His shoulders slumped, and he nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Well, it did," I said, my voice hard as steel. "And now you're going to have to live with the consequences, just like me." As he left, I felt a strange sense of empowerment wash over me. In that moment, I knew that no matter what happened, I would be okay. I had the strength and determination to get through this, with or without Mark by my side. And if he thought he could just waltz back into my life and play the doting father, he had another thing coming. A few days after breaking the news of my pregnancy to Mark, I found myself pacing the living room floor, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of me still clung to the hope that this child might be the wake-up call he needed, that he would come to his senses and realize the mistake he was making. The sound of the doorbell pulled me from my thoughts, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. When I opened the door, Mark stood on the other side, his expression a mix of guilt and determination. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. I crossed my arms over my chest, watching him warily. "About what?" He turned to face me, his eyes pleading. "About the baby. About us." I scoffed, shaking my head. There is no us anymore, Mark. Aita, you made that clear when you decided to throw away our marriage for some fling. His face fell, and he ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Heather is not just some fling, Emily. I love her, and I want to be with her and our child. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my cheeks flush with anger. And what about my child, Mark? The one growing inside me right now? Are you just going to abandon us too? He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Of course not, Emily. I want to be a part of this child's life too. I laughed bitterly. Oh, how generous of you. You want to be a part-time father to my child while you play house with your mistress and her baby. Mark's expression hardened. That's not fair, Emily. I never meant for any of this to happen. Well, it did happen, I shot back, my voice rising. And now you have to face the consequences of your actions. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. Please, Emily, let's not do this. Let's try to work things out for the sake of our child. I shook my head, feeling a surge of resolve coursing through me. No, Mark, you made your choice, and now you have to live with it. I'm not going to let you waltz back into my life and play the doting father whenever it's convenient for you. His shoulders slumped, and I could see the defeat in his eyes. Emily, please, get out, I said, my voice low and steady. Get out of my house and don't come back unless it's to discuss the divorce proceedings. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but one look at the determination on my face must have convinced him it was futile. With a heavy sigh, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the weight of my decision. As the days passed, I found myself hardening my resolve further. Mark had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. I wouldn't allow him to string me along or use the pregnancy as leverage in the divorce. No, I would take control of the situation and ensure that I got everything I deserved, both for myself and for my child. With Laura's help, I started gathering evidence of Mark's infidelity, documenting every lie, every betrayal, and every instance of his deceit. I would make sure that when the divorce proceedings began, I had an ironclad case against him, ensuring that he wouldn't be able to weasel his way out of taking responsibility for his actions. As I sat in my home office, sifting through the mounting evidence, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. Mark had thought he could walk all over me, discard me like a used rag, and move on to greener pastures. But he had underestimated my strength, my resilience, and my determination to see justice done. I would make sure that he paid for what he had done in every possible way. And in the end, I would be the one standing tall, with a secure future for myself and my child, while he was left to wallow in the ruins of his own making. With the evidence of Mark's infidelity mounting, I knew it was time to take the next step in my plan for revenge. I called Laura over to my home office, and we pored over the documents and recordings I had gathered, plotting our next move. This is good, Emily, Laura said, her brow furrowed in concentration. Really good. With all of this, you'll have a solid case in the divorce proceedings. I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. That's the plan. Mark thinks he can just toss me aside and start a new life with his mistress. He's got another thing coming. Laura leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. Are you sure you want to go through with this, though? Divorces can get really messy, especially when there's a kid involved. I met her gaze, my resolve unwavering. I'm sure. Mark made his choice, and now he has to face the consequences. I'm not going to let him waltz back into my life and play the doting father whenever it's convenient for him. Laura nodded slowly, a sly smile spreading across her face. All right, then. Let's make sure he pays for what he's done. With Laura's support and the mounting evidence against Mark, I felt a surge of confidence coursing through me. But I knew that in order to truly secure my future and that of my unborn child, I would need more help. The kind of help that only someone with real power and influence could provide. That's when I decided to reach out to my father, Robert, the CEO of a major corporation. I hadn't spoken to him much since the news of my pregnancy and impending divorce, but I knew he would want to be involved, especially when it came to protecting his grandchild's future. When I called him and explained the situation, he was initially hesitant, urging me to take the high road and avoid any messy legal battles. But as I laid out the evidence against Mark and my plan for revenge, I could sense his resolve wavering. Are you sure about this, Emily? He asked, his voice tinged with concern. Once you set this in motion, there's no going back. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves. I'm sure, Dad. Mark betrayed me in the worst way possible, and he has to face the consequences. I won't let him get away with this, if not when my child's future is at stake. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then finally he spoke. All right, sweetheart. If this is what you really want, you have my full support. Just say the word, and I'll make sure you have the best lawyers and resources at your disposal. Relief washed over me, knowing that I had my father's backing. With his influence and resources, Mark didn't stand a chance. He had made the mistake of underestimating me, and now he would pay the price for his arrogance. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with my father and the legal team he assembled, building an airtight case against Mark. Every lie, every betrayal, every instance of his deceit was carefully documented and catalogued, creating a mountain of evidence that would be impossible for him to refute. As the legal proceedings began, I could see the panic in Mark's eyes as he realized just how much trouble he was in. His lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but I was resolute. I wanted everything, and I wouldn't rest until I got it. Throughout the process, Mark tried to plead with me, to appeal to my sense of compassion and the love we once shared. But every time I looked at him, all I saw was the man who had shattered my trust and thrown away our marriage like it was nothing. And so I pressed on, my determination fueled by the burning desire for justice and the knowledge that I was doing this for the sake of my child, to ensure that they would never have to suffer the same kind of betrayal and heartbreak that I had endured. The day of the divorce proceedings, I strode into the lawyer's office with my head held high, my father and Laura by my side. Mark and his attorney were already there, and the tension in the room was palpable. As we took our seats, Mark leaned over and tried to catch my eye. Emily, please, can we talk about this? I don't want it to come to this. I met his gaze, my expression cold and detached. There's nothing to talk about, Mark. You made your choice, and now it's time to face the consequences. He opened his mouth to respond, but his lawyer placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. The proceedings began, and for the next several hours, we systematically laid out the evidence of Mark's infidelity and betrayal. With each piece of damning evidence presented, I could see the color draining from Mark's face. His lawyer tried to object and deflect, but the mountain of proof was undeniable. Recordings of Mark's secret liaisons, bank statements showing unexplained expenditures, and even private investigator reports detailing his sordid affairs, it was all there laid bare for the world to see. As the hours ticked by, Mark's composure began to crumble. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. At one point he turned to me, tears in his eyes, and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." But it was too little, too late. I simply stared back at him, my expression unwavering, resolute in my determination to see justice served. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge cleared his throat and delivered the verdict. Mark would be required to pay a substantial settlement, covering child support for our unborn child as well as alimony and other costs. He would also be forced to sell off several assets, including the house we had once shared, to cover the financial obligations. As the terms were read aloud, I could see the defeat in Mark's eyes. He had gambled everything on his affair with Heather, convinced that he could discard me and start anew without consequence. But he had underestimated my resolve, my strength, and my willingness to fight for what was rightfully mine. After the proceedings concluded, Mark tried to approach me one last time. "Emily, please, can we talk? I never wanted to hurt you like this." I turned to face him, my expression steely and unwavering. "You had your chance, Mark. You chose to throw away our marriage for a fling, and now you have to live with the consequences." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother. It's over, Mark. You've lost everything. Your job, your money, and most importantly, your family." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there alone, the weight of his decisions finally catching up to him. In the weeks that followed, I focused on preparing for the arrival of my child, determined to create a secure and loving environment for them. Mark's betrayal still stung, but but the satisfaction of seeing him face the consequences of his actions helped to dull the pain. As I settled into my new apartment, a sense of peace washed over me. I had taken control of my life, reclaimed my power, and ensured that my child would never have to suffer the same heartbreak and betrayal that I had endured. And as for Mark, well, let's just say that his troubles were only just beginning. In the months following the divorce, my life took an unexpected turn. Thanks to my father's mentorship and influence, I found myself rising through the ranks of the corporate world at a breakneck pace. It was a sharp contrast to the struggles Mark was facing in the wake of our split. Word of his infidelity had spread like wildfire, and before long he found himself out of a job, his once promising career in shambles. I'll never forget the day I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked like a shell of his former self, disheveled, unshaven, and carrying a burden of defeat on his shoulders. When he saw me, his eyes widened, and he quickly tried to duck down an aisle, but I called out to him, "Mark, is that you?" He froze, his shoulders slumping in resignation as he turned to face me. "Emily," he mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. "I barely recognized you," I said, taking in his appearance. "Life's been tough, I take it?" He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You could say that. After everything that happened, I lost my job, my house, pretty much everything." A part of me felt a twinge of pity for him, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of vindication. This was the price he had to pay for his betrayal. "And what about Heather?" I asked, unable to resist twisting the knife just a little bit. "I assume she's sticking by your side through all of this?" Mark's expression darkened, and he averted his gaze. "Heather left me," he muttered. "Once she found out I was broke, she took off. Said she didn't sign up for this." I couldn't help but let out a laugh at the irony of it all. "Well, what did you expect, Mark? You threw away a perfectly good marriage for her, and now she's done the same to you." His jaw clenched, and I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "You don't have to rub it in, Emily. I know I screwed up, okay? I've paid the price for my mistakes." "Have you, though?" I countered, taking a step closer to him. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still living in denial. You haven't truly faced the consequences of your actions." He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let me make something clear, Mark. You lost everything because of your own greed and selfishness. You chose to betray me, to throw away our marriage for a fling, and now you're reaping what you've sown." His shoulders slumped, and I could see the defeat in his eyes. He knew I was right. "I hope you learn from this, Mark," I continued. "I hope you understand the pain and heartbreak you've caused, not just to me but to everyone around you, because if you don't, you're destined to repeat the same mistakes over and over again." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there alone, a broken man consumed by the weight of his own actions. As I made my way through the rest of the store, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't just the fact that I had won the divorce settlement or that I was thriving in my career. No, what truly mattered was that I had taken control of my life, refused to be a victim, and ensured that Mark faced the consequences of his betrayal. And as I rubbed my growing belly, feeling the gentle flutter of my unborn child, I knew that I had made the right choice. My child would never have to endure the pain and heartbreak that I had experienced. They would grow up knowing that their mother was a strong, resilient woman who fought for justice and refused to let anyone take advantage of her. From that day on, I vowed to be the best mother I could be, pouring all of my love and energy into creating a secure, nurturing environment for my child. And as for Mark, well, he would have to find his own way, living with the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life. The months flew by, and before I knew it, I found myself sitting in the plush leather chair of the CEO's office, the very same chair my father had occupied for decades. As I looked around at the sleek modern decor and breathtaking views of the city's skyline, a sense of pride and accomplishment washed over me. I had come so far, rising through the ranks with a determination and drive that had left my colleagues in awe. And now, here I was, taking over the reins of the company from my father, ready to lead it into a new era of success. As I settled into my new role, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain and heartbreak of Mark's betrayal, the grueling legal battle, and the long road to rebuilding my life, it had all been worth it to get to where I was today. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts, and I looked up to see my assistant poking her head in. "Miss Anderson, you have a visitor." I frowned, glancing at my schedule. "I don't have any appointments scheduled for this afternoon." The assistant shifted uncomfortably. "It's your ex-husband, Mark. He's insisting on seeing you." A flicker of annoyance flickered within me, but I quickly tamped it down. Of course Mark would show up unannounced, thinking he could just waltz back into my life whenever it suited him. "Send him in," I said, straightening in my chair and adopting a cool, professional demeanor. A few moments later the door opened and Mark stepped into the office. He looked even more disheveled than the last time I'd seen him, his clothes rumpled and his eyes sunken. It was clear that life had not been kind to him since our divorce. "Emily," he said, his voice strained, "thank you for seeing me." I arched an eyebrow, refusing to let him see how his presence affected me. "What do you want, Mark?" He took a deep breath, his gaze darting around the opulent office. I wanted to apologize for everything." I let out a derisive snort. "A little late for that, don't you think?" His shoulders slumped and he took a step closer to my desk. "I know I can never make up for what I did to you, to us, but I want you to know that I regret it every single day." "Do you?" I challenged, leaning back in my chair. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're only sorry because you got caught and lost everything." Mark flinched as if I had struck him, but he didn't deny it. "You're right," he admitted softly. "I was selfish and arrogant. I thought I could have it all. The perfect wife, the mistress on the side, the picture-perfect life. But in the end, it all blew up in my face, and I lost everything that truly mattered." I studied him carefully, searching for any hint of deception or manipulation, but all I saw was a broken man, a shadow of his former self, consumed by the weight of his own mistakes. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he continued. "I just wanted you to know that I understand the gravity of what I've done, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, even if it's never enough." A heavy silence hung in the air, and for a moment I considered offering him a sliver of forgiveness, a chance to absolve himself of the guilt that so clearly weighed him down. But then I remembered the pain he had caused, the trust he had shattered, and the future he had nearly robbed from me and my child. "You're right, Mark," I said, my voice low and steady. "You can't make amends for what you've done, not to me, and certainly not to our child." His eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "This child will grow up knowing the truth about their father, that he was a selfish, deceitful man who valued his own desires above everything else. They will know that you betrayed us in the worst possible way, and that you were too weak and cowardly to face the consequences." Mark's face crumpled, and I could see the impact of my words hitting him like a physical blow. But I didn't stop there. "You had your chance at happiness, Mark. You had a loving wife and the opportunity to be a father, but you threw it all away for a fleeting moment of pleasure. And now you'll have to live with that regret for the rest of your life." He opened his mouth, perhaps to plead or beg for forgiveness, but I held up my hand once more. "I think it's time for you to leave," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "And don't bother coming back. You lost the right to be a part of our lives a long time ago." With that, I turned away from him, dismissing him from my presence and my life once and for all. As he shuffled out of the office, his shoulders hunched in defeat, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had faced the demons of my past, confronted the man who had nearly destroyed me, and emerged victorious. I had claimed my future with strength and resilience, leaving Mark to face the consequences of his betrayals alone, a cautionary tale of greed and deception. And as I gazed out over the city skyline, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, secure in the knowledge that I was a survivor, a fighter, and a force to be reckoned with.
My name is Amanda. I married my childhood friend Frank, whom I had been dating since high school 6 months ago. I had known Frank's family for a long time, as we had known each other since childhood. I was able to get married without too much anxiety. We had known each other since childhood, so we had many friends in common. We were blessed to have so many people at our wedding, and I know that Frank and I will continue to support each other for the rest of our lives. That's what I swore in my heart. A few months after getting married, I became pregnant with a child of my beloved Frank. I was at the peak of happiness. And that's not all we were thankful for. Frank's mother supported us almost every day. We lived together in Frank's parents' house after getting married. Frank, being the only son, was well taken care of by his parents. That's why he expressed a desire for us to live together when we got married. Since I didn't particularly dislike my in-laws, I readily agreed to cohabitate. We moved in together the day after the wedding. I loved doing chores with my mother-in-law and talking books with my father-in-law. Even when I reported my pregnancy, they were so happy that they shed tears as if it were their own. When I tried to do something around the house, "It's okay, Amanda. I'll do it." She says so and took the lead in doing all the household chores. "Mom, I'm feeling really fine today, so it's okay." Even when I said that, "It's fine, it's fine. You have an important little one in your belly. Amanda, take a proper rest and prioritize the baby in your belly." She would stop me whenever I tried to do anything. I was genuinely happy that she cared about me, and her concern was appreciated. However, if I couldn't do anything at home, I would end up with too much free time. I used to work part-time, but as soon as I found out about the pregnancy, my mother-in-law recommended quitting immediately. Frank, my husband, also thought it was a good idea, so I ended up quitting my job. That's why, without the ability to do household chores at home, I really had nothing to do. "Mom, I feel like moving a bit, so I'll go shopping. Is there anything you want me to buy?" When I asked, No. Shopping involves carrying things, so I'll go. Even if you want to move, you're not in the stable period yet. You need a rest now." She wouldn't even allow me to leave the house like that. I know my mother-in-law is worried about me, but truth be told, enduring such days is becoming suffocating. My mother-in-law kept her job when she was pregnant with Frank. She has a history of being hospitalized due to a threatened miscarriage. It seemed like she was worried about me not going through the same. If I tried to move even a little, "It would be tough if you ended up hospitalized like me, right?" She said that, stopping me. As you can imagine, I didn't want to get into an awkward situation by talking back to my mother-in-law. I decided to rest as I was told until I was in stable condition. Once I was stable, my mother-in-law started allowing me to go for walks in the neighborhood, and I was able to go outside, although only on my husband's days off from work. We bought snacks at the supermarket, had picnics during walks, and occasionally went shopping with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law started cooking meals together with me after I entered the stable period. During the early stages of pregnancy, I thought she was genuinely just expressing concern. Then, at 38 weeks, while I was climbing the stairs at home, my water broke, and both my husband, Frank, and father-in-law were at work, so my mother-in-law drove me to the hospital. My mother-in-law handled all the communication with my husband, and when our son was safely born, my husband had already rushed to the hospital. First, my husband held our son.
"Oh, he's so adorable."
Saying that, my husband gazed at our son with tears in his eyes, cherishing him. Watching this, tears welled up in me somehow.
"Thank you, Amanda. I'm truly happy."
Saying this, my husband looked at me and smiled. which made me cry too. "Can I come in?" My mother-in-law, who had been so considerate as to stay outside my hospital room, came in to see me.
Mom, you should hold him too. He's seriously adorable.
Saying that, my husband handed our son to my mother-in-law. I felt somewhat embarrassed. My mother-in-law, who had cherished me and eagerly awaited her first grandchild. I wonder what she would say when she sees the long-awaited son. Thinking about it, I felt restless. "Thanks to you, Mom, I was able to give birth safely. I really appreciate it." When I said that to my mother-in-law, who was holding our son, she uttered words I hadn't imagined. "He doesn't resemble him at all." "Huh?" I inadvertently asked again. Mom, not resembling who?" "I'm saying he doesn't resemble Frank. Is he really Frank's child?" What is she talking about? Originally, this should have been a time enveloped in happiness, with the birth of a child with the person I love. Yet for some reason, my heart couldn't catch up with the current situation, and I felt a strong pounding in my chest.
Mom, what are you saying?
Instantly, my husband retorted to his mother, but she continued without apologizing. "Frank, take a look for yourself. Compare it to your childhood photos. They don't look anything alike, do they?" Saying that, my mother-in-law showed us a picture of Frank as a newborn that she had on her phone. No, it's not like they're completely identical. As I said that, "Amanda, be quiet. A child whose parentage is unknown like this? I can't accept it." Saying that, she left the hospital room.
Hey, Mom.
And for some reason, even my husband followed my mother-in-law out of the room. I was left behind, and I saw the face of my son in my arms. Tears welled up in my eyes. Even his eyes, ear shape, and eyebrows looked so much like Frank's. In the end, Frank never came back to the hospital room after that. On my messaging app,
I'm worried about Mom, so I'm going home with her.
I received only that message. I couldn't believe Frank's attitude at that time. But immediately after childbirth, I couldn't blame him. About a week passed, the day of discharge. Frank came to pick me up, but he seemed low-spirited for some reason. "What's wrong? It's the day of discharge, and we can live together from today." As I peered into his face, my husband didn't seem happy at all. Moreover,
Mom is still in a bad mood. Try not to provoke her too much.
He says something incomprehensible like that. Even though I had just given birth and was physically and mentally exhausted, why do I have to be considerate of my mother-in-law on the day I was discharged? While thinking about that, I couldn't say it to my husband, and the car ride was silent. Even after returning to my in-laws' house, the awkward atmosphere didn't disappear. Rather, right after coming back, my mother-in-law said, "Oh, you're back? Or rather, you managed to come back." I was told such a sarcastic remark. My father-in-law glanced over to see what my mother-in-law had said to me and immediately looked away. I restrained the feeling of wanting to cry. "Mom, I've said it many times, but this child is Frank's. His name is Brody. Won't you please show him some affection?" I appealed like so. However, my mother-in-law completely ignored it. "Hey, Frank, say something too." I appealed to my husband.
Well, the fact is, he doesn't look like me.
He said it so casually. For some reason, I stopped crying at that moment. It was the moment when my husband, who was supposed to protect me, abandoned me. Thinking back, even that day when I gave birth, if it were true, my husband should have properly told my mother-in-law and convinced her. And yet, in the end, my husband believed what his mother told him. He took his mother's side. I felt empty, and since that day I gave up on expecting my mother-in-law to show affection to my son. My husband, too, showed no signs of participating in childcare. My stress increased day by day. Can you give the baby some milk? I want to take a bath. When I made the request,
I've just come back from work. Why should I sacrifice sleep when I don't even know if the child is mine?
he started saying such terrible things. Unbelievable. I'm done. Saying that, I prepared the milk myself and quickly went into the bath the moment the babies fell asleep. I lived those days like that. I honestly thought that if the only one denying it was my mother-in-law, I would have done a DNA test or something to confront her with the evidence. However, even my supposed strongest ally, my husband, didn't believe that the child was his. The pain of my mother-in-law not believing my son was her grandson was nothing compared to the agony of my husband not supporting me. But my parents moved far away to the countryside at my father's insistence when I got married. Originally, my parents, who wanted to live in a naturally abundant place, went far away right after I got married, so I couldn't rely on them very quickly. Moreover, they were genuinely happy for me. They also adored Frank like a real son and trusted him. That's why I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents about this incident. One day, after months of silence, my mother-in-law approached me despite ignoring me whenever I tried to talk.
Amanda, can I talk to you for a moment? Can you come to the living room with your child?
Okay. My mother-in-law, who had ignored me and paid no attention to my son until now, might apologize for everything. At least that's what I thought. However, my expectations were quickly shattered. When I entered the living room, my mother-in-law and husband were sitting. Then she said to me,
"Can't you take that child and leave?"
"Huh?" I was suddenly thrown off balance and my head couldn't catch up with what was happening. In my bewilderment, my mother-in-law stared at my son and said,
"There's no sign of him resembling us, even though he's been born for quite a while. I've had enough."
Saying that, she glared at our son, and my husband remained silent in response. Seeing that, everything somehow felt absurd to me. I gathered my resolve. Understood. If it's come to this, I'll leave. I'll pack my things and go. Saying so, I signed the divorce agreement and returned to the room. I began to pack my belongings. Even seeing me like that, my husband said nothing, engaging in a cheerful conversation with my mother-in-law. "Please pay child support." When I said that,
"How can you do that when it might not be Frank's kid?"
I was told by my mother-in-law. Feeling irritated, I didn't retort and left the house, heading to my parents' place. When I explained everything to my parents, they were puzzled at first, but they gladly accepted and decided to take care of me until I found a job and saved enough money. Of course, I sought child support from my ex-husband through a lawyer, but it was never transferred. Personally, I had no desire to deal with my ex-husband and in-laws again, so I didn't pursue the child support further. Several years later, when my son turned 6, I received a call from a local friend who knew about Frank, informing me that Frank had passed away in a traffic accident. Of course, I heard about it soon after his passing, but I didn't want to be involved, and my son was going through a busy and active phase, so I didn't attend the funeral. A few months later, I happened to be back in my hometown for the first time in several years when I was invited to get together with some local friends. I wanted to buy a souvenir before going to a friend's house. My son and I went to a department store where we used to go as a family.
"Amanda?"
Upon hearing her call, I turned around to find my mother-in-law, whom I hadn't seen in years. As I stood frozen, she quickly approached us.
"Is this Brody?"
Saying so, she spoke to my son.
"Brody, I'm your grandmother. You really look just like Frank."
She began making such remarks. Unable to endure my mother-in-law's statement, I separated my son from her and said, "Please, stop this now. Because of you, When I said that, my mother-in-law responded,
"Don't get so angry. I've wanted to meet you for a long time."
She conveniently mentioned this, and feeling like I might explode with anger, I said, "Excuse me." I took my son's hand and left the scene.
Is she my grandma now?
My son asked, and although I had concealed it until now, my son, now in elementary school, seemed genuinely curious. He kept asking me as I stumbled with my words.
Grandma is Mom's mom, right? Who is that person?
Unable to hide it any longer, I explained briefly to my son when we got home. Upon hearing that, my son said,
Mom, you've worked so hard. You're amazing.
Saying that, he patted my head. Touched by my son's kindness, tears welled up, and I genuinely felt that giving birth to this child was the right decision. Several months later, I was already living in an apartment with my son after moving out from my parents' house. My mother-in-law came to visit me. Why are you here? I asked, and she responded,
Frank had mutual friends here, right? After asking around a lot, I finally found you.
Saying so, she forcefully entered the house. Please stop, leave, I said, and she replied,
Frank passed away in an accident, and my husband also died of an illness. You and my family are the only ones left.
Saying this, she pleaded as if she were the tragic heroine. Then, either because of her loud voice or something else, my son came out from the next room. Seeing my son, my mother-in-law said,
Brody, let's live together, okay? I'll buy you lots of delicious things in a bigger house than this one.
Saying that, she patted my son's head. Please, stop, I said, and my mother-in-law took out a thick envelope and said,
There's $35,000 as child support so far. My family is only you two now, so please, live with me.
Saying this, she handed me the envelope. Then she turned to my son and said,
Brody, I'm your grandma. I want to live with you, Brody. I'll buy you lots of things you like, right?
Saying so, she smiled. In this situation, I felt tears welling up. Now the feeling of what's happening now, and the uncertainty of whether it's okay to take away my son's grandmother left me in a tangled mess of emotions. I found myself at a loss for words, and then,
I'm not going, okay? Huh?
My mother-in-law sounded dumb when my son said that.
Brody, what are you talking about? You can live with your grandmother, you know? There are lots of delicious things, and I'll buy you plenty of toys, too.
Despite my mother-in-law's desperate attempts to persuade,
I don't want it, 'cause you were mean to Mom, right? My only grandma is Mom's mom.
Saying this, Brody waved off his grandmother and sat beside me. My mother-in-law seemed to despair as she fell silent, and after staring for a while, she suddenly stood up and left without a word. Since that day, there has been no contact from my mother-in-law. Of course, she never came to visit. The child support my mother-in-law left has been saved for my son, and I haven't touched it yet. When I consulted about this with my parents,
He wasn't paying child support, so why not?
I was grateful and decided to take it. I don't know how my mother-in-law has been doing since then. Frankly, it doesn't matter to me right now, because I have such a strong son by my side. My son who protected me from my mother-in-law at a very young age. My son who chose me without being deceived by my mother-in-law's sweet temptations. I love my son from the bottom of my heart. Until now, and of course in the future as well, I want to take responsibility to ensure my son can be happy even without a father. I want to continue raising him. My ex-husband showed up at my parents' house.
I need you to pack up your stuff and leave right now.
What? Despite my loss for words, my ex-husband continued.
My wife is pregnant. Yes, your sister.
Yes, my ex-husband. He had an affair with my sister and left me 5 years ago.
I want to create a good environment for the baby. Unlike a single lady like you for the rest of my life, we can make better use of this house than you. You're infertile, so no one wants you. You know what I'm saying? Just stop thinking and get out of here.
I sighed and shook my head. I can't.
What? Oh, come on.
You don't know who lives in this house right now. Immediately after, I saw a large figure appear from behind me. My husband turned blue and started shaking.
Why?
My name is Jane. I'm an office worker who turned 35 this year. Thankful of the fact that I am seen to be well respected within the company, I'm one of those who have risen up the ladder among my peers. I'm living a good life now, but there have been twists and turns up to this point. The biggest thing that happened in the last few years was the divorce. The cause was my ex-husband's infidelity. 5 years ago, Joe, my husband at the time, eloped, and it turned out to be my own sister. She's always had a penchant for coveting my possessions, and she's very consistent on it. I'll give her that. But it was still out of the ordinary. At the time, Joe and I were co-workers. Joe was a soft-spoken, perceptive person. As a young man, I was attracted to that about Joe. Then Joe took a liking to me and we started dating. After a while of dating, I introduced Joe to my family. Since we were dating on the premise of marriage, we talked about how we wanted to make things right. I happened to be back at my parents' house at the time. The moment my sister saw Joe's face, I was so surprised that she let out a surprised voice. The reason was, my sister and Joe went to the same university, and they knew each other. After that, my sister and I and Joe often went shopping together. We had a lot of fun. We had a great time. We continued to socialize even after Joe and I were married. However, after a few times of the three of us, I began to feel more and more uncomfortable. We would get excited about topics that only Joe and my sister knew about. They started going out alone together in secret. You went out with my sister yesterday? I wish I could have gone with you.
Oh yeah, maybe some other time.
That made me kind of nervous. And then one day, I was invited to dinner by a colleague from the company where Joe and I work. I gladly accepted the invitation, but I got a shocking revelation. Joe was seen entering a hotel room, arm in arm with a woman who was not me. I asked my co-worker to describe the woman. It turned out to be my sister. I didn't want to believe it, but when my co-worker showed me a picture of her, I had to believe it. I asked my colleague to send me the photo data. I decided to question Joe that day. Hey, what's this all about?
What? No, this is...
Joe, with his simpering attitude, was moping the whole time. You've been cheating on me this whole time, haven't you? You two made fun of me, right? Did you have fun? No matter what I asked, Joe didn't say anything. He just looked down. Joe disappeared the next day. When I woke up in the morning, Joe was nowhere to be found. I didn't think it was possible. I tried to call my sister, but she was disconnected. It wasn't until 3 days later I found out that my sister and Joe were together. At the house where me and Joe were living, the divorce papers came. About the same time, I received an email from my sister. The email from my sister read, "I will be happy with Joe." Just those words. Naturally, I couldn't accept that. But I didn't know where to go to protest. I couldn't get in touch with her. Furthermore, it seems that Joe had sent his resignation letter by mail to his employer. I had no more connections in any direction. I was at my wit's end, and finally decided to divorce him. And for a while after that, I couldn't get over it. I couldn't accept the idea of my own sister and my husband eloping. I just couldn't accept it. But I couldn't stay depressed forever. So I decided to take my anger and resentment out on my work. While I was working so hard, I could forget about Joe and my sister. And it worked. I was recognized for my contribution to the company. I was given a good position. Then I was blessed with good fortune. 5 years have passed since my sister and Joe eloped. Life has been going well for me. Then one day, I had no work that day. I woke up later than usual, thinking of having my breakfast. And when I got up from the bed, I heard my phone on my bedside table. It was a phone call. I looked at the screen and saw a blocked call. Normally, I wouldn't answer it, but I answered it with all my might because I woke up from sleep. Yes, who's calling?
Oh, Jane, it's been a long time. Hey, it's me, Joe. I'm glad you took my call, and that you're still using this number.
To my surprise, it was my ex-husband Joe who called me. I almost slid off the bed in surprise. What? Joe?
Why? Why are you being so cold? Why? We were a couple once. I could at least call you.
Joe, while laughing, said what was so funny. He acted as if nothing had happened. I remembered the anger I thought I had forgotten. What do you mean a former couple? You've got to be kidding me. How dare you contact me just like that? What the hell do you want?
Oh, come on. Calm down. You haven't changed a bit, have you?
His easygoing tone irritates me even more. Perhaps sensing this, Joe finally got down to business.
Well, yes. You're living at your parents' home now, right? Why don't you pack up your stuff and move out right now? Because your sister and I have decided to move into that house.
This doesn't make any sense to me at all anymore. I don't know what kind of thought processing he's going through.
We got married, actually. We recently had a baby. We want to provide a good environment for her. Of course, you wouldn't say no, would you? I'm saying this out of the kindness of my heart. If you stay at home with your parents forever, you'll never be able to remarry.
I suddenly got a headache. Please, don't be such an idiot. You're right, Joe. I'm back at my parents' house now. I don't know where the hell you got that information from, but I don't care. And of course, I would refuse. Why would I do that for you both? That I would give up my parents' house for you people? With that, Joe came back at me in a slightly harsh tone. He seemed to slightly take aback.
I'm sorry. You're 35 years old and infertile. I don't know how you can find someone to marry you.
When Joe and I were married, I never got pregnant. I'm assuming that's what he meant by infertile. That's a disgusting thing to say. Is that all you have to say? Because I will never give you this house. And saying that, I just hung up. I didn't want to talk to Joe anymore. But still, it was too selfish. He had an affair, he eloped. And now, they want to take my house too. I hope they give up now, but I don't know what will happen next. A few days passed. I was busy at work that morning. I finally took a lunch break after 2 p.m. I went to my favorite restaurant near my office. I finished my lunch. When I entered the entrance of the building to go back to the office, I saw a familiar figure. No way! How could he be here? It was Joe. He had gained so much weight over the past 5 years, but the way he stood there was unmistakably Joe. I immediately tried to hide, but before I could do so, he saw me. Joe was saying,
"Oh, finally."
He called out at me, and he came fluttering toward me.
Oh, there you are. I waited long, you know. So, to continue our conversation from the other day, when can you leave? I'd like you to leave by next month if possible.
But I told you no to that talk. And the nerve for you coming all the way to my office. Get the hell out of here. Joe has a smile on his face, but he looks annoyed and continues to talk.
You're talking like that again. I don't see why you, Jane, a single woman, should have to live in that house. We'd rather have it with our unborn child. Wouldn't it be better if she lived there? With her mother and father? Am I wrong?
You're not even listening. No matter how hard I try to talk him out of it, he will eat me up. Joe kind of terrified me. You're being a little pushy, aren't you? No matter how much you ask, what you're asking is impossible. You had an affair and eloped on your own. Why can't you go live somewhere else? When I said this, Joe wrinkled his face. He raised his voice.
You listen up. The only reason I had the affair in the first place was because you were infertile. If you had been able to give me a child, I wouldn't have had an affair. It's all your fault. So take responsibility and at least give us a place where we can live.
I can't even begin to fathom it. Saying it's my fault he had an affair? It's too much to take the blame. Are you serious right now? I've got work to do. I have to go. Joe was still trying to say something, but he finally seemed to notice the stares around him. He told me to remember that, and he left the entrance. Joe finally gave up on me. That's what I thought, but I was reminded that I was naive. A week after, Joe came to my office. After work was over. I was relaxing at home, watching TV. Suddenly, the intercom rang. I wasn't expecting anyone to come to visit, so I got up. I decided to look into the intercom monitor anyway. Standing there were Joe and my sister. I've really had enough of this. I rushed to the front door and opened it vigorously.
Oh, Jane. Did you get your packing done? I didn't hear anything from you, so I came all the way here in person.
Wow, long time no see, sis. You heard from Joe, didn't you? We're having a baby. You know, I'll take care of it when it's born.
All I could do was to sigh in spite of all this.
What's the matter? Are you tired? Well, I don't really care anyway. But listen to me. It's great that we're having a baby, but we don't have the money. So we're going to have to live here, okay?
My sister says so with a superior look in her eyes. Joe further opens his mouth.
Yeah, so I recently realized that this house is not yours. Are your parents home? Let me talk to them. It's your mother and father's first grandchild. I bet they'll accept us, right?
I couldn't help but laugh when he said that. I didn't think that he didn't know about this.
What are you laughing at? You're not very nice. Hurry up and get Mom and Dad out.
Huh? Are you serious that you didn't know? Mom and Dad are gone. Yeah, my parents don't live in this house anymore. After you, Joe, and I divorced and I moved back home, they gave me this house as a tidy gift. And now they are living a retired life in the countryside on my mother's side. So I am the owner of this house. When I confronted them with this fact, both my sister and Joe's eyes widened. Understand? This house is my house, so I have the right to make all the decisions. I said it so clearly, but Joe still insists.
Well, okay then. Jane can live in this house. Let's live together, okay? Let's be friends again, just the three of us, just like before.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's a great idea. You won't be alone in such a big house. It must be so lonely to live alone, right? We'll all be happy if we live together.
Another outrageous idea. I was about to argue with them. I was about to open my mouth, when suddenly... Oh, honey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be so loud. Look, it's my ex-husband and my sister that I told you about. It was my now husband who approached me, and in his arms is our daughter. My husband mumbled.
I see.
He greeted Joe and my sister in confusion.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Jane's husband. This is our daughter. Isn't she cute?
Both Joe and my sister couldn't close their mouths. They must be very surprised. To tell you the truth, I have already remarried. About a year after Joe and I divorced, I met my current husband through a friend. Things went smoothly. We got married less than 6 months after we started dating. Soon after, I became pregnant with our daughter. Now I work and am a housewife at the same time. My husband helps me with housework and childcare, so I wouldn't neglect my work in our home, and I have been able to get a promotion. I think you get the idea now. There's nothing you can do. You can't take advantage of me at all. My husband, my daughter, and I, we're a family, and we get along just fine.
What is this, Jane? You're not infertile? No way, that's a lie.
Joe starts to question.
What the hell? You're my sister and you're married to someone so handsome? I can't believe you're married. It's not fair. It's not fair.
Kate began to stamp her feet as she said that. My husband looked down at her coldly and said,
That's the way it is. Please leave us alone. If you ever come near our family again, I will call the police. Is that clear?
The word police and the force of my husband's words pushed them over the edge. Joe and my sister turned blue in the face and immediately left. After that, Joe and my sister never appeared in front of me again. They were in financial trouble. They snuggled up at Joe's side of the family. But they found out about what they did 5 years ago, and they were not impressed. So they turned them down early. No wonder. And this is what I heard from a mutual friend of ours. Joe was having an affair again without fail. They are currently in the middle of a divorce. The reason for this is also surprising. As a matter of fact, my sister was never pregnant. She was lying to get back home somehow. And apparently, Joe didn't know about that she wasn't really pregnant. He was also deceived. Of course, a lie like that was easily exposed. He eloped with my sister because he wanted a child. If she wasn't pregnant, then he didn't need her anymore. Joe had been having affairs because he wants children. However, in the future, Joe will never be able to have children. The probability that Joe is infertile. I'm not a doctor, so I can't say for sure. But given the circumstances, it's extremely likely. I wonder when Joe will realize this. Or will he finally find out? Either way, it's none of my business anymore. And then one day, I received a letter from Joe at home. I was dubious, so I decided to check it with my husband just to be sure. The letter said that he went to the hospital for a checkup and was diagnosed as being incapable of having children, and that he regretted what he did. He regretted eloping with my sister 5 years ago, and that he wanted to try it with me again. Naturally, I ignored the letter. My husband tore the letter to shreds in a fit of anger. He must have given up when he didn't receive a reply, or maybe he didn't expect a reply from the beginning. I never received another letter from Joe. He was a selfish and unfulfilled man to the very end. I should just forget about such a man and live life happily. I now live with my kind and caring husband. With a kind and caring husband and a precious daughter in the prime of her life, I would do anything to preserve this happiness that I have finally found. That's what I promised myself.
From quitting work to full-time house husband. Returning early to find unconscious husband. But emergency call reveals the unexpected truth.
Wait, it's really no good.
Despite my husband's attempt to quickly stand up and stop me, the side dish unexpectedly came to the rescue. With a swift motion, my husband extended his right leg and accidentally stepped on the side dishes, slamming his body onto the floor.
Ouch!
Ignoring my groaning husband, I energetically opened the door. Surprise! Well, I already knew. When I saw off the paramedics, I noticed some unfamiliar woman's shoes placed at the entrance. You see, my name is Eleanor, and I work as a manager in a company. I have lived a life solely focused on work until now, but I got married 6 months ago and now live with my husband, Owen. My husband and I are 5 years apart, and I'm the older wife. Our paths crossed 8 years ago. He came to my workplace as a salesperson for a job magazine, eager to make a sales pitch. I still vividly remember that moment. As a recent graduate, he had a nervous expression on his face as he dived into the sales pitch. My husband, who had recently become independent from his senior colleagues, was unsure of whom to approach and appeared flustered at the reception desk. And it happened that I was coincidentally there. I returned from a slightly late lunch to find my husband at the reception desk. "Is there something I can help you with?" Unable to get a response from him at the reception desk and sensing his suspicious behavior, I approached him.
I came about the job magazine."
"Oh, I see. Did your contact person change?"
"Huh?"
My husband looked bewildered. Being a newcomer, he was eager to knock on the doors of this company. However, job magazine contracts are usually handled by the headquarters of major companies. Unaware of this, he was determined to secure a major contract. Unfortunately, he ended up coming to the company where I work, which is a subcontractor. When I explained this to him, his face turned beet red.
"I'm sorry."
"Oh, no, not at all. I believe that kind of enthusiasm is really important in your work, you know. Good luck with everything."
"Thank you very much."
At that moment, I found my husband so fresh and adorable, or so I thought. But there was no romantic feelings involved. I simply thought he was cute as a newcomer. So I completely forgot about this exchange at the time. Fate is an unpredictable thing. It honestly slipped my mind how much time had passed since then, but my husband and I unexpectedly ran into each other at a store near the company. Yes, I had forgotten about the interaction with my husband at that time.
"I appreciate your help back then."
Huh?
At your company's reception."
Oh, right. How have things been since then?
"Yes, there are still many difficult things, but I'm somehow managing and doing my best."
We engaged in casual conversation and then headed home, but we continued to run into each other several times at that convenience store. We exchanged contact information, and I was probably the first one to become aware of each other as potential romantic interests. I really wanted to support him in his clumsy but hard work. However, what still concerned me was the fact that he was 5 years younger. Although I had feelings for him, I couldn't clearly express those feelings. It was at that moment when he asked me to be in a relationship, and I gladly accepted without any hesitation. Since then, we have been dating for a long time, and it has brought us to the present. I felt happy to have been able to marry the person I loved so much. However, 4 months after our marriage, he decided to quit the job he had been working so hard in as a salesperson for the job magazine. Of course, he consulted with me before making the decision to resign.
"No matter how hard you work as a subcontractor, you can never see a clear future."
While he works as a salesperson for the job magazine, he is not an employee of the company that publishes the magazine. He is actually an employee of a company approved to conduct businesses as a subcontractor for the major company. I knew from the beginning of our relationship that he was a subcontractor. However, it was after we got married that he started expressing these concerns.
In that aspect, Eleanor, you're in a better position. You have a stable job as a proper employee.
I find myself at a loss for words during moments like these. He's a full-time employee of the company, and I'm sure he's in no different position than I am.
Since the change in department heads, I'm really struggling. The quotas have become more demanding, and lately, I haven't been able to meet them. I'm constantly getting scolded by the department head.
I see. What if you try a different approach?
That's what the department head also mentioned. So you're still a manager, Eleanor. Did you forget how it feels to be in a lower position?
In the end, no matter what I say, it doesn't seem to reach my husband, who has fallen into a negative mindset. Lately, my husband has been like this all the time. Honestly, I was tired of this atmosphere.
I want to quit my job.
I couldn't affirm or deny those words. I thought that if it meant being liberated from this negative period, it might be worth considering and accepting.
From now on, I'm thinking of being a full-time house husband. Eleanor, you enjoy your job, don't you? I'll put more effort into taking care of the household tasks in return.
However, there were some words he said that I found hard to understand. Can someone who has never really done household chores suddenly be able to handle them? It seemed like he was underestimating the work involved in managing the household. Certainly, there is a difference between working outside the home and taking care of the household. But managing the household encompasses providing food, clothing, and shelter, and it's a demanding job. I honestly struggle with household chores, and I have deep respect for those who can smoothly handle them. I wonder if he can handle all of that. It's a significant doubt. Household chores. Have you ever done them before? Oh, and you were living with your parents until you married me, right? Besides, even after we got married, I was the one doing the household chores, right?
I don't mind. It's just household chores.
Just household chores? Those words really bothered me. Just? It's not something that simple.
It's okay. Being a full-time house husband is just the right kind of job for me.
I can't help but feel that my husband's remarks are belittling the role of a house husband. It didn't sit well with me. We owe our ability to live our lives to this point to the foundation provided by our parents. In my family, specifically, my father worked outside the home to earn a living while my mother took care of the household. It was the collaboration of my parents that made me who I am today. Both are important jobs that must not be lacking. My husband seemed as if he didn't get that.
Eleanor, you think I can't do it, don't you?
That's not true at all. I was just a little unsure. You know, I've never seen you doing household tasks before.
We won't know until we try, right? Are you already doubting me before I even start?
It's not exactly like that. However, I've seen many junior colleagues at work over the years. Most new employees are full of enthusiasm, but as they get more accustomed to their work, some of them start cutting corners. But they lack experience. That's why they sometimes overlook the areas where corners can be cut, which can lead to significant mistakes. And they all have something in common. At first, they are all eager and say, "I'll do my best." You won't know until you try, is their emotional appeal. I see my husband doing the same thing right in front of me. I can't help but have a bad feeling about it. But this is not a workplace, it's our home. Since it's our family, I wanted to believe in his motivation. So I agreed to my husband resigning from his job under the condition that he takes care of the household. For the past week, my husband has been working hard, despite being unfamiliar with it. I can see a bit of dust in the corners, but I won't point it out. Since he's making an effort, I believe it's the time to encourage and support him. In the midst of all this, my husband mentioned wanting to attend cooking classes.
I want to improve my cooking skills and treat you to delicious meals, Eleanor.
Thank you. Do your best. I agreed without hesitation. I was happy to see his enthusiasm. I believe that this expense should be spent without hesitation. However, after attending cooking classes for 3 weeks, he started expressing complaints. Even when I come home tired from work, all that's prepared on the table is convenience store lunches. Hey, what have you been doing during the day? I couldn't stay silent anymore after a week of continuous convenience store meals.
I've been studying cooking.
I don't see any results though.
I'm tired, so there's nothing I can do about it.
I understand. Working can be tiring sometimes. Are you tired for a whole week? If it were just a few days, it would be understandable, but this seems like a complete mess.
You don't understand anything, Eleanor. You have no idea how difficult household chores are.
I do understand. That's why I've been expressing my gratitude all along.
But it's actually me who's doing it. You're all talk, Eleanor.
I felt incredibly angry. What was the point of that discussion we had? Well then, don't do the housework anymore.
Huh?
Owen's eyes are sparkling with excitement. He really reminds me of those juniors at the company who only talk big.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because you can't do it, right?
I guess it's not for me. Trying it out made me realize that.
Oh well, in that case, I'll take care of the housework. You should focus on finding a job.
Huh? Why?
Why? I should be the one asking that question. How can you ask why in this situation? You abandoned the housework, so you're unemployed, right? I don't intend to support an unemployed person. Please find a job and make good use of your time. Owen fell silent for a while and then looked at me with wide eyes.
Let's have a child.
Huh?
I'll take care of the child.
Oh, really? Do you even like children? By the way, do you have any qualifications related to education?
No, I don't.
Oh, I see. Well, even without qualifications, you can still work. If you want to, you can try looking for a job.
No, not like that. It's about raising a child. It'll be our child, you know?
What?
Let's have a child. Then it won't be a problem if I stay at home, right?
My affection for him, which had barely held on, was shattered by his words. To this person, it's impossible. Let's get a divorce.
What? Why?
Why did you marry me in the first place? Before marrying me, you were working, putting in so much effort. And yet, right after we got married, you quit your job and said you would do the household chores. I accepted that and have been watching over you, but it didn't last. If being married to me is moving you in a negative direction, that's not a good thing. Besides, I want you to keep your promises. I've been supporting you in my own way all this time. But I'm not a saint. I don't intend to support someone who's fully dependent on me. His expression changed drastically.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I won't rely on you anymore. I'll take care of the household chores properly. Please, don't leave me.
Seeing my husband crying in front of me, my resolve remained unchanged. Even though he was sobbing, I knew that no real solution would come from comforting him now. So I suggested that we have a proper discussion at a later time. I actually wanted to have the discussion right away, but I had a business trip the next day and didn't have the time for a meaningful conversation. Although I felt reluctant to leave, I finished preparing for the business trip. The next morning when I woke up, breakfast was prepared. My husband kept apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry," multiple times. "Thank you for breakfast, it's delicious."
Yeah, I'm glad. When will you be back?
Maybe in 3 days.
Oh, I see. I'll take care of things at home properly. Take care on your business trip, okay?
Yeah, thank you. In front of me is a husband who seems completely heartbroken. It would be a lie to say that my heart is not swayed by his appearance. However, no matter how complicated my personal life may be, I won't let it affect my work. I mentally switched gears and headed to my business trip. I had planned to have meetings spread out over 3 days, but one of the client's representative fell ill, so the meetings were canceled on the second day. I ended up coming back home 1 day early. I thought about contacting my husband to let him know about the change in plans, but considering the tension between us, I decided to just inform him that the schedule had changed. I was worried that it would further unsettle him. With that in mind, I purchased a ready-made meal and returned home. "I'm back!" There was no response when I called out at the entrance. The house was completely dark. Maybe he's not home. I walked towards the living room without turning on the lights, and as I opened the door to the living room, there was a loud noise. What? I quickly turned on the lights to find my husband wearing only his underwear collapsed on the floor. "Hey, Owen?" It was my first experience of feeling completely blank in my mind. I hurriedly approached the living room. What should I do? An ambulance! I quickly called an ambulance. While waiting for them to arrive, I kept calling my husband's name desperately, but he remained unconscious. Afterwards, the paramedics arrived and tried to communicate with my husband, but there was no response.
Please accompany us.
Understood. I was in a state of panic. Oh, I dropped a few side dishes there. Please be careful. I called out to the paramedics to prevent them from slipping on the side dishes I accidentally dropped in a moment of panic, but the scattered side dishes were also at my feet. As I stepped on them and lost my balance, the phone I was holding flew into the air and fell forcefully towards my husband.
Ugh.
Did I just hear a voice? I unintentionally made eye contact with one of the paramedics. I gently peered into my husband's face and realized something. Perhaps the paramedics are thinking the same thing. I apologize.
Huh? Oh.
You can go home now, it's fine.
Ah, I see.
Yes, I'm truly sorry for causing a disturbance.
Oh, no worries. Well then, we'll take our leave.
They lowered my husband from the stretcher and left the house. I saw them off to the front door. Then something caught my eye. I truly felt sorry. I apologized to the paramedics as well, but if there were people who truly needed them while they were tending to my husband, then what my husband did would be a grave offense. I couldn't forgive it from the bottom of my heart. My husband, wearing nothing but his underwear, was lying on the floor. The season was approaching winter. Surely it must be very cold like this. Wake up quickly. Why did you do such a thing? There was no response from my husband. Hello, Mr. Feigned Illness?
Achoo!
You don't sneeze when you're unconscious, right? Wake up already. He seems to have quite the resilience. Ah, that's right. I should dress you in clothes, or you'll be cold. Let me bring some clothes. As I tried to get up and head to my husband's room, something wrapped around my leg.
No!
My husband was desperately grabbing on to my leg. Oh, is the fainting act over?
Absolutely not, because it's no good.
What is it?
Don't come into my room.
Why not?
Sir, it's a surprise. I'm preparing a lot of things for you, Eleanor, when you come back tomorrow. Don't look.
Then it's a surprise for now.
Wait, it's really not allowed.
As my husband hurriedly got up and tried to stop me, the side dishes came in handy. With a swift motion, my husband extended his right leg and accidentally stepped on the side dishes, slamming his body onto the floor.
Ouch.
Ignoring my writhing husband, I forcefully opened the door. Surprise! I already knew. When I saw off the paramedics, there were unfamiliar woman's shoes placed at the entrance. Are you my husband's affair partner?
It's not an affair. We're serious, but...
Oh, even though you're serious, you were instructed to hide, right?
It's to keep me from getting involved.
Is that so? You're careless.
No, she's my sister.
Oh, weren't you an only child? Don't tell such obvious lies. Hey, affair partner, do you want to marry him?
Of course. There's no one else as kind as him.
Oh, I see. That's what you say. Well then, I'll grant you a divorce.
Huh? Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Wait a minute. I don't want to divorce you, Eleanor.
Wait, Owen? Didn't you say that you wanted to divorce but your wife wouldn't let you? Wasn't that what you said? Isn't it contradictory?
Hold on. Just shut up already. You're obviously just a fling for me. I like older women who have their own income. You can't support an easy life like mine. Seriously, just shut up, you idiot.
How cruel! You deceived me.
It's the foolish one who gets deceived.
She is sobbing. Well, there's no room for sympathy, though. That's right, it's the foolish one who gets deceived.
Eleanor, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry about this time. I was lonely and ended up playing around, but You are my true love, Eleanor.
No, I'm also one of those who got deceived by you. So you wanted to marry a financially stable older woman to have an easy life, didn't you?
Huh? Did I say something like that?
Oh no. Don't you remember the insults you hurled at your affair partner? You said them right in front of me. I have also woken up. I will divorce you. Of course, as you are the one at fault, I will seek compensation from you. I don't need someone in my life who pretends to faint to cover up their own affair. There is nothing left to hesitate about.
Wait a minute. If you're gone, how am I supposed to go on living?
Work.
Huh?
Work and take care of yourself on your own.
Wait.
We have nothing more to talk about. We'll involve lawyers from now on. My husband stubbornly refused to leave, but when I contacted my in-laws, they took him away. I later claimed damages from the tearful mistress who left in a hurry. I expected to be met with resistance, but surprisingly she immediately transferred the compensation. She returned to our house with her parents, bowing and apologizing on all fours. Well, she must have believed my husband's lies. Cheating is not commendable, but thanks to her, I'm grateful for having an advantageous position in the divorce proceedings with my husband. If she truly reflects on this matter, I hope she learns from it in the future. About a month after that incident, I divorced my husband. He stubbornly resisted until the end, but my father-in-law silenced him under a reign of fear. He was a foolish man who committed infidelity, but my in-laws are very sincere people. They also managed to defeat him when he greedily demanded a share of the assets. Well, considering we were married for a short time, the issue of asset division doesn't really matter much. It's really insignificant in the grand scheme of things. In the end, my ex-husband handed over $3,000 from his savings as compensation, and we reached a settlement. Afterwards, I heard that he, being unemployed, is assisting my former father-in-law with his occupation as a fisherman. With zero savings and no financial freedom, he is living under the surveillance of my parents-in-law, or so I've heard. Given that, my former father-in-law was determined to instill discipline and had a strong will. I imagine my ex-husband is being treated quite harshly. Meanwhile, I have become somewhat distant from love due to this incident. However, it's frustrating that it's because of him that I ended up like this. If there is another chance someday, I want to seize it without hesitation. After all, life is still long.
My sister-in-law lied to our whole family about her husband's illness, and then her world came crumbling down on her.
My husband was diagnosed with depression. He needs to rest. I need you to rent me your house. Why would I do that? When my husband and I refused, my sister-in-law and her husband took us by surprise. But it seems like their plan backfired. Linda, you got what you deserve. Please, make sure they pay for their crimes. My name is Michaela. I'm a 32-year-old office worker. My husband Aaron and I have been married for 6 years. We have been together since high school and started dating when we were 18 years old, so we've been together for 14 years now. Even after all those years, we're still in love just like we always have been, and we feel very happy every day. After graduating from high school, my husband and I went to the same university. There, he studied business administration and I studied English literature to improve my English skills. We both did well in our studies in university and got good grades, which we used as an advantage to get jobs. After that, I got a job at a small company and started to work very hard and became a certified interpreter while I was working. My husband got a job at a large company and is working very hard. We both worked hard at our jobs and made time for each other. We continued our relationship and got married when I was 26. We actually didn't have a wedding. That's because we were trying to save money. My husband and I have been saving money since before we got married. It was for one goal only. We both dreamed of building our own home. So even after we started working, we lived at each other's parents' houses and saved money until we got married. We got married when we both started advancing in our careers. My husband got a promotion and I got my certification and started working. And even though we started to have more money, we tried to rent cheap apartments as much as possible. We didn't go out to eat except on anniversaries, and we cooked our own meals. We felt that we were making a good living, and more than anything, we were happy knowing that we were saving more and more money. We could see that we were doing the right thing, and we were very happy to visualize that we were moving towards our dream of owning a home. Once we had saved up a certain amount of money, my husband and I started going to real estate agencies and began thinking about getting our own house. I was so happy and content during that time that I felt my dream of owning my own house was becoming more and more realistic. When my husband and I had meals together, we would often talk about the house, and we would naturally come up with ideas like, I want this one. Now, 10 years after we both started working, my husband and I have finally decided to build our own home. I couldn't have been happier. It had always been a dream of mine to build my own home since I was in high school, and I told my husband about that when we were just dating. And now, it was finally time for our dream home to come true. I have been excited every day since we started construction for the house. Michaela, you seem to be in a good mood. Really? To tell you the truth, the construction for my house just began. Oh, I see. It's always been your dream, right? Yes, since high school. That's a very long time. No wonder you're so excited. Once the house is complete, please come over. Really? I'd love to. Sarah is my senior, and she is an interpreter and a pretty good one at that. When I was just starting out as an interpreter, she supported me a lot. She's 3 years older than me, but she is so cool in her fashion, her mood, her way of speaking, and her little gestures, and I admire her. She has an aura about her that makes you think you are in a fashionable European town just walking around with her. And when I talk to her in person, I can see she's not trying to pretend to be something she's not, but just living her life as it is. I hope to be a cool woman like Sarah someday. When my dream of owning a home comes true, I'm going to work hard on improving myself. As I was spending my days thinking about these things, my home was finally complete. Wow, it's amazing. The house is just as I wanted it to be. When we arrived at the completed house, we were impressed just by looking at the exterior. And once we got inside, it was amazing. It was exactly what my husband and I had asked for after consulting with the realtor. This is going to be our future home. I'm getting really emotional, you know. We're going to live here together every day and make a lot of memories. I'm excited just thinking about it. We'll probably have a baby and we can play together in the yard. A boy or a girl? I'd like a boy. I want to play catch with him. I want a girl. I want to go shopping and go to cafes with her. My husband and I were thrilled and excited the whole time, and we had a lot of fun talking about the future. After that, we started living in our own house. Every morning when I wake up, I'm so happy knowing that I get to live in my own home. The kitchen is very easy to use. I enjoy cooking every day. I naturally wanted to try out different recipes, and my cooking skills improved as I went along. We also invited our respective families to the house. When my parents arrived, they were both moved into tears. I'm so happy for you both. I'm glad you were finally able to fulfill your dream. Mom, Dad, don't cry. There is no way a proud parent would not cry during this moment. I was happy that my parents were happy to see that I was so excited. And when my in-laws come over, they were all so touched. It was really nice. You can tell they talked it over and made the house exactly the way you wanted it. That's what my in-laws were saying. Oh, look at the kitchen! I wish I could use it. That's what my sister-in-law exclaims. She's 2 years older than my husband and I, but she is a bit mentally young and childish. And she was more excited than others. It's amazing, amazing, amazing! You and your family are going to live in a house like this? I mean, we already live in it. We built this house, my husband told her. But my sister-in-law was excited as ever. looking around saying, "Oh, I'm so jealous." And there was one more person who was excited. That person was my sister-in-law's husband, Tyler. "Hey, there's quite a few rooms. The big yard would be perfect for barbecues." "It makes me want to live here." "That's for sure." My sister-in-law and her husband were joking, of course, but my husband and I were a little taken back by that comment. We didn't want them to say that they wanted to live in our house that we had worked so hard to build. Well, after that, we were all too busy eating and drinking together, so my husband and I decided not to mention it. But then, about a month later, I got a call from my sister-in-law out of the blue. "Hey, Linda, what's wrong?" I rarely receive phone calls from my sister-in-law. What on earth did she want? "The house of yours is wonderful. Will you let me live there for a while?" I was surprised when my sister-in-law called me and suddenly said something like that. What do you mean by that? First of all, I didn't understand what she meant. Is she asking to move in with us? My husband has depression. Oh, really? I'm so sorry to hear that. It's been hard, very hard. He can't go to work anymore. He's been resting in the room right now. But he seems to be in a lot of pain. I see. So please, he needs some rest, so let me rent this house. Why would I do that? I'm sorry that Tyler's depressed, but I can't just rent you our house. Wow, you're terrible. You're supposed to be nice to sick people, aren't you? I mean, even so. Put Aaron on the phone. He's not back from work yet, but I think he feels the same way. We won't let you rent our house. That's your opinion, right? Aaron cares about his big sister, so he'll definitely rent it out to me. Where on earth does my sister-in-law's absolute confidence come from? I ended the call by saying I'll talk to my husband because I was afraid she would pester me endlessly with requests. I told this to my husband when he came home from work and he was stunned. Of course I won't allow that. What is Linda thinking? My husband said that and called Linda himself, but she still wouldn't back down. Do you not have a shred of kindness in your heart? Tyler is in so much pain. You're a heartless person. Even I could hear my sister-in-law's screams through the phone. My husband, not wanting to beck and call, coldly dismissed her, saying it doesn't matter what you say to me. But my sister-in-law hung up the phone, saying she'd go talk to him in person next time. I was on speaker, so I heard what my sister-in-law said too. I feel really dumbfounded. What in the world is she going to do when she comes over here? And a few days later, my sister-in-law and her husband really came to our house. Please, please, please just give us the house. Tyler is in a lot of pain. Tyler looked pale, much different from the last time he came to visit us. I still can't rent you the house, but what the hell happened? My husband asked, looking tired. He's actually harassed by his boss. It's driving him crazy. I'm sorry to hear that. Right, so please. No, that's crazy, right? What? Why do you need to rent our house? Because like I said, Tyler needs to rest. It's going to feel more like a vacation home in this new house. In this house that you've been living in, right? It'll lift up his spirits and help with the depression. Huh? My husband sounded annoyed. My husband and I feel the same way. My sister-in-law's logic is far-fetched and ludicrous. She's probably trying to make it look like they wanted to live when they first came here. But neither my husband nor I deceived such an easy-to-see lie. I wouldn't rent the house no matter what you say. You say he has depression, but you have a medical certificate or something. Has he reported this to the company? There are procedures to get medical benefits and all that. Did you report to the company that he was being harassed by his boss in the first place? What's the company doing about this? I don't trust someone who says they're suffering from depression when they don't even explain those details at all. My sister-in-law and her husband seemed to panic when my husband spoke up. Hey, don't say those things all at once. Tyler and I have never been in a situation like this before. Anyway, it's true, he's depressed. Just let us rent the house. No means no, just give up. When my sister-in-law tried to force us to rent the house to them, my husband stubbornly refused. When we wouldn't budge, even after she raised her voice in anger, my sister-in-law finally cursed at us for being bastards and took her husband home. We were so tired. I doubt he's depressed if they're acting this way. I'm really sorry for the trouble she put you through. I'm so glad you said no. This is our home and we won't let anyone take it away. My sister-in-law and her husband were a pain in the ass, but it was still nice to know that my husband and I had a strong bond. But then something unexpected happened. When my husband and I refused, my sister-in-law and her husband took a surprising step. What? You gave Michaela and Tyler money? When my husband received a phone call from my parents-in-law, we learned a shocking truth. It seems that my sister-in-law and her husband told my parents-in-law that Tyler was suffering from depression, and my parents-in-law gave them money. Why did you do that? Because I feel sorry for them. In times like this, we should support each other as a family. My parents-in-law seemed to completely believe my sister-in-law and her husband's story, and no matter what my husband said, it was all they did for them. My parents-in-law has been giving them money to my sister-in-law and her husband frequently since then. I can't believe they're taking advantage of my in-laws like this. What they're gonna do is nothing but fraud. My husband and I couldn't be more disgusted with my sister-in-law and her husband, but we have no proof that Tyler is not depressed, so we wonder what to do. Then, one day something unexpected happened. Sarah, you don't look so well. Yeah, I had a little too much to drink last night. I had a drinking party with some of my classmates from college. I see. Your classmates must be a lot of cool and fashionable people. No, they're not. They're all old men and women. Well, I can't tell that them, though. Laughing, Sarah showed me a photo that she took at that party yesterday. Huh? I was shocked when I saw the photo, but could that man in the suit be... Oh, Tyler? Do you know him? Well, yeah. I see. Did Tyler seem to be doing well to you? Huh? Yeah, he was very energetic. He's been wearing expensive watches and recently bought a car. A watch and a car? I felt anger welling up inside of me. Michaela? The anger must have been showing on my face, and Sarah looked at me with concern. I'm sorry. What happened? Does it have to do with Tyler? To tell you the truth, I told Sarah everything. There's no way he has depression. He said yesterday he was covering for his subordinate at work when he made a mistake. He's working like a normal person. So he was lying after all. That's disgusting. He was using the money he got from his wife's parents to live lavishly, right? When Sarah found out the truth, she got very angry with him. She promised to explain to my in-laws with me and my husband. Is that true? I was drinking with Tyler and I heard him correctly. So I don't think he's sick. He's going to work as usual, and with the money you guys gave him, he and his wife are spending it on luxuries. I told you, my sister has been lying to you guys. My in-laws were shocked to learn the truth. I'm going to call Linda and her husband right now. My father-in-law said that and called my sister-in-law. And an hour later, my sister-in-law and her husband arrived. Dad, why'd you call me here all of a sudden? My sister-in-law was instantly disgusted when she noticed me and my husband. Why are you here, Aaron? I'm here because it's important for the family. Huh? What are you talking about? At that moment, Tyler came up behind my sister-in-law and pretended to be weak. But the moment he saw Sarah's face, Tyler froze in place. Hello, Tyler. Why are you here? I explained to Tyler, who was turning pale. She's my senior at work. I had no idea that you and Sarah went to college together. She told me that you guys saw each other at a party the other night, and she told me all about it. Tyler's face is getting paler and paler. Linda, you lied to us about Tyler being depressed. What are you talking about, Dad? Tyler is really depressed and he can't go to work right now. Lying to all of us like that won't help you now. We know that Tyler was covering for his coworkers' mistakes, and that he's been taken aback by his most recent work accomplishments. My sister-in-law finally understood what was going on. Mom, Dad, this isn't what it looks like. Then what is it? You deceived us. No, what do you mean depression? What do you mean unable to work? Have you ever given the slightest thought to those who are truly suffering from the disease? It's the end of you as a human being to tell such a lousy lie for the sake of your own luxury. My sister-in-law and husband were completely freaked out when my father-in-law yelled at them so angrily. I'm going to ask you to return the money I've given you. What? That's impossible. I already spent it. And you'll have to work or sell whatever you bought to pay us. If you don't pay us, we'll report it to the police. The police? Oh, no! The couple slumped down on the floor, looking pale in relation to the situation. Afterwards, Linda and Tyler ended up selling their car, watch, and other things to pay back my parents-in-law. However, they still didn't have enough money, so Linda, who used to be a housewife, is now working part-time to pay back the money. Sarah told the other university classmates about the incident, and even people at Tyler's workplace found out, so it began to embarrass him. The manager and the head of the department sarcastically said to him, "You seem to think that everything is power harassment." My sister-in-law and her husband tried to deceive us, and my parents-in-law with terrible lies, but as a result, they had to pay the price. Please, my life is so hard, I can't stand it. Can you believe me just this one time? One day, Linda and Tyler came to our house and got down on their knees and asked us to help them, but there's no way we were going to help them. Linda, you got what you deserve. Please, make sure they pay for their crimes. Don't ever get involved with us again. If you ever come back here, we'll call the police. After we said that, my sister-in-law and her husband ran away from our home quickly. I don't know how they've been doing since then, but I guess we can rest easy, know that they stopped coming. They caused us a lot of trouble, but I'm glad it's settled for now. My husband and I were relieved to be back in our own home and enjoying our life again. Sarah, thank you so much for everything. It's fine. I'm rather sorry I didn't realize that my lovely junior was in trouble. As an apology for the trouble my classmate has caused you, let's go out for a drink together today. I'll pay. All right. Thank you. I'll follow you for the rest of my life. I can't thank Sarah enough for giving me the opportunity to expose my sister-in-law and her husband's wickedness. I'd like to buy her a drink, but I'm going to treat her to a delicious home-cooked meal the next time I invite her over. Please, tell me another interesting overseas story today. Sure. Today I'm going to tell everyone something that happened in Brazil with a young man who worked in an ice cream shop. I can't believe that Linda lied about her husband's illness and stole money from her parents. What a scammer. And I can't believe she thought Michaela and Aaron would allow them to live at their home. I'm glad Michaela and her family were able to protect their house from Linda.
I inherited $790,000. Husband and Mill demanded my money. I told them I'm actually single. Surprise twist.
My name is Kate, and I'm 40 years old. I've been married to my husband Mason for 10 years. He's the same age as me and was a colleague at work. We're now at different branches, but we used to be in the same department. My husband is a responsible person who is admired by his subordinates. He's a bit vain and doesn't like to show his weaknesses to others. He was a confident, flashy, and masculine man. His work performance was highly regarded by his superiors, and he was expected to be promoted without any problems. In contrast, I'm a rather low-key and inconspicuous type. I was honestly surprised when he passionately pursued me, as we have opposite personalities. After dating for 2 years, he proposed to me with a large bouquet of roses. I had never been so loved by a man before, so I accepted his proposal immediately. I couldn't wait to start our wonderful life together. However, what awaited us was living with my in-laws. There was no prior discussion, and I wanted to refuse, but my husband was adamant about living with them. My parents are good people, so everything will be fine, he said, and he passionately explained how much they were looking forward to living with me, so I couldn't refuse. We've been living with his parents in their home for the past 10 years. Life there was unimaginable when we first got married. Kate, you've forgotten to clean the entrance again. My mother-in-law would start nagging as I finished making breakfast for everyone. This ritual happens every day. I'm sorry, I would say, but she would reply, just apologizing won't do. If you understand, go and do it right away. Even though I had to go to work, I was treated like a servant from morning. For the past 10 years living with my in-laws, I've been forced to wake up at 5 a.m. to cook breakfast and clean. My mother-in-law, a housewife, should have time to do housework herself, but she doesn't. I rush through the morning chores, go to work, come home, and immediately start cooking dinner. By the time I go to bed, I'm so exhausted that I practically pass out. This has been going on for so long that I've become weak and often feel unwell. The cause is probably stress. Do the cleaning properly. I don't want the neighbors to think we're neglecting it, my mother-in-law would say as she relaxed in the living room eating the breakfast I made. If you don't finish quickly, you'll be late for work, she would add. Even with this going on, my husband never once stood up for me. My father-in-law would hide behind his newspaper and pretend not to see. Since moving in with my in-laws, I've been subjected to terrible mistreatment. The stress has caused my weight to drop drastically, and I now look unhealthy. My period stopped due to my sudden weight loss, and I couldn't get pregnant. Despite being the cause of this, my mother-in-law continued to blame me. Before getting married, I cared about how I looked and was healthy. Now there's no trace of that. The stress from the mistreatment and the shock of seeing my reflection in the mirror make me feel depressed. I had become completely submissive to my mother-in-law. I lost all motivation and couldn't bring myself to leave the house. It was during that time that I received news of my father's death. He had suddenly passed away in an accident. I hadn't been back to my parents' home in a long time because my mother-in-law and husband would criticize me for wanting to go. I deeply regretted not visiting more when I heard that my father had passed away. My parents' home is about an hour's drive from my in-laws' house, so it's not too far away. I asked them if they would come to my father's funeral. My father's funeral is happening, so... Well, we won't be going. Just have your family there, okay? The two of them cut me off before I could finish speaking. I never thought that they could be so heartless. I simply replied, I understand, as I held my trembling shoulders from anger and sadness. Many people attended my father's funeral. He was self-employed and had connections with a lot of people. Everyone who came to the funeral shed tears, showing how much my father was loved. Kate, it's been a while. You've lost so much weight. What happened? My mother, who I hadn't seen in a long time, was surprised at my gaunt appearance. Oh, it's nothing. You're not sick, are you? I can't bear to lose you too. My mother, who had just lost her husband, thought I had some disease and started crying. I'm not sick, Mom. I'm fine. Don't worry. I calmed my mother down and we took a break in the waiting room. Well, if you're not sick, what is it? I recalled my interactions with my mother-in-law and husband. Even when they learned that my father had passed away, they didn't say a single thing to comfort me. Anger bubbled up inside me, and I decided to tell my mother about my life with my in-laws. Actually, I've been experiencing what you might call bride bullying. I'm just so tired. As I looked down while speaking, she looked at me with a worried expression. I'm glad you're not sick, but I can't relax at all. Is that the reason you haven't been visiting us much? I nodded, and my mother handed me a piece of paper. Read it for yourself and think carefully about what to do next. The paper she gave me was my father's will. My meticulous father had left a will in case something happened. It included information about inheritance as well. I get a $790,000 inheritance. That's what it says. You can decide how to use it. I was shocked by the large amount. At the same time, I had hope that I could end the living situation with my in-laws. With this, I can build a house and leave my in-laws' home right away. My life seemed to be getting better thanks to the inheritance my father left me. I went home to my in-laws' house and did housework as usual. On days when I have plans, the house gets messier than usual. It can't be helped since there's no one to clean. As I silently did housework, I thought about the $790K I had inherited from my father. I had resentment towards my mother-in-law, but I still wanted to be with my husband. I decided to be honest about the large inheritance and proposed that we leave my in-laws' house. I have something to talk about. I began speaking with my husband after my in-laws had gone to bed and we were alone. Yeah, so it's about my dad. It turns out I'm going to inherit his estate. Oh, really? How much? Well, it's $790K. When I told him the amount, my husband looked dumbfounded as if he couldn't believe the figure. What? Are you serious? Yes, $790,000. When he understood what I had said, he was delighted and said, "Wow, he left that much for you? That's so generous." So, about what to do with the money? Since he was in a good mood, I decided to get to the main point. But before I could speak, he said something outrageous. "We need to transfer that money to my mom's bank account right away." I didn't understand what he was saying. It was so absurd that I thought he was joking. Wait, why? I inherited it, so that's not right. As I laughed and spoke, he slammed his hand on the table. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about? A wife's money belongs to her mother-in-law." He probably didn't even realize he was saying something ridiculous. Looking into his serious eyes, I felt frightened. "I'm sorry. I don't quite understand what you're saying. All I wanted was to talk about building a house for the two of us." But he wouldn't let me and tried to make my inheritance into his mother's property. That night, I was so shocked that I couldn't sleep. The next morning, as I was preparing breakfast, my husband and mother-in-law approached me with angry expressions. "So Kate, I heard that you inherited $790,000 but said you wouldn't give it to me. What are you thinking?" She had already heard about the inheritance from my husband. "But I'm the one who inherited it." "Stop arguing and transfer it to my mom's account right now." "A wife's money is the family's money, right?" The two of them seemed determined to get their hands on the inheritance by force. No matter how much I resisted, I was only blamed. Thinking that resistance was futile, I fell silent and my husband showed me a piece of paper. "You're getting carried away just because you got your hands on some money. What's with the attitude? I'm the one supporting you. If you don't change your mind, it's divorce." The paper was a divorce form. "I've already signed it. Take this and go back to your parents' house. If you apologize properly, I might not go through with the divorce." I received the divorce form with my husband's section completely filled out. As I stared at the divorce form, my memories came flooding back. I had never been supported in this house. I paid the same amount of living expenses as my husband, and all the housework was my responsibility. I had never been taken care of. Yet, the two of them always looked down on me. In the end, they even tried to take my father's money. If I stayed here, I might give in to the pressure from the two of them and hand over the inheritance. But this money was what my father had left for me. I thought it was rather an opportunity to be told to go back to my parents' house. Having the filled-out divorce form in hand, I now had the power to make decisions for the future. I swore in my heart that I would never give up my father's inheritance and made a certain decision. That day after work, I went back to my parents' house. "I'm home." "Welcome back, sweetie. I had a feeling you'd be coming home soon," my mother said with a gentle smile as she warmly welcomed me, worn out from my experiences. The table was set with her home-cooked dishes. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten a meal made by someone else. As I took a bite of the warm meal, I was moved to tears by how good it all tasted. "Did you tell Mason about the inheritance?" "Yes, and that's when things got complicated." I told my mother everything that my husband and mother-in-law had said. She was stunned by the shocking content. "The inheritance is yours, and it's up to you to decide how to live your life from now on." As tears streamed down my face, she gently put her arm around my shoulder. After staying at my mother's house for a week, I decided to return to my in-laws' home. "Well, I'm going now. Take care." I was no longer afraid to return to that house. With a refreshed mindset, I headed back to my in-laws' home. "Finally back, huh? Have you reflected on your actions?" My husband and mother-in-law were waiting for me with their arms crossed. "Yes, I'm sorry. Please let me live in this house again." I uttered an apology that was only skin deep. Hearing this, my mother-in-law smirked. "Then hurry up and hand over the inheritance." Actually, the inheritance procedures are taking longer than expected. It's still not with me. It's a complicated process, so it'll probably take another half a year or more. "It takes that long?" "Well, that's fine." They seemed satisfied, thinking that I would obediently hand over the inheritance. But they continued to nag me about staying at my mother's house for a week. "The house is a mess because you didn't do your duties as a wife. Clean it up quickly." My in-laws' home was a mess after just a week, and it was unsanitary. It was actually impressive to make it so filthy in such a short amount of time. Yes, the old me would have been devastated to see the house in this state. But now, things were different. I didn't care about being bullied by my mother-in-law or being forced to do tough housework. I did the housework as ordered by her. 10 months later, it was my mother-in-law's birthday. "Well, we're going now. Make sure to keep the house clean." She always went on a trip for her birthday, and of course, they never took me. "By the way, have you received the inheritance yet?" "It's supposed to arrive today." "Well, isn't that perfect? That $790K is a present for my mom. Make sure to transfer it to her account before we return." There was no way the inheritance would conveniently arrive on her birthday. My husband couldn't see through my lie. I didn't respond, but simply saw them off with a smile, saying, "Take care and have a safe trip." Once they were out of sight, I began to put my plan into action. I had been waiting for this day for a long time. They would surely be surprised when they returned from their trip, but it was no longer my concern. I quickly packed my belongings and left my in-laws' house. Wow, this is amazing! I was moving my belongings into my new home. In fact, I had built a house with my father's inheritance. I'm so happy I get to live in such a beautiful house. I had decided to invite my mother and live together. I am truly happy that I don't have to be bothered by them anymore. I sank into the soft sofa and felt content. Today is a celebration of our new home with my mother. We invited a chef to our home and spent a luxurious day. The next evening, I received a phone call from my husband. Hey, what's going on? He couldn't understand what was happening since all my things were gone when they returned home. I won't be coming back, so goodbye. I tried to hang up since I didn't want to talk to him anymore, but I could hear my mother-in-law raising her voice on the other side of the phone. What the hell do you think you're doing? Where are you now? I can't answer that. You told me to clean the house, so I put my things away. That's not funny. Besides, you haven't transferred the inheritance yet. How many times do I have to say that a daughter-in-law's money is mine? Huh? I'm single, you know. When I answered that way, my screaming mother-in-law suddenly fell silent. Single? Well, I'm actually divorced. I submitted the divorce papers Mason gave me. We're strangers now. Goodbye. I said that and hung up the phone. Imagining the dumbfounded mother-in-law on the other end, I could not stop laughing. My heart felt so light now that I had nothing to do with that family. After that, my ex-husband called me many times. When I had time, I would purposely answer the phone and let the abusive words from my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law flow. I recorded those calls from beginning to end. I decided to consult the police with those recordings. It's not uncommon for cases of harassment from an ex-husband. We'll issue a warning before it becomes dangerous. Fortunately, the police responded quickly and went to my former in-law's house to issue a warning. For my image-conscious former in-laws, having the police come was damaging enough. Plus, a subordinate of my ex-husband who lived nearby saw the police coming. Since my ex was a prominent figure in the company, the rumor spread quickly. Furthermore, his subordinates and colleagues who didn't like him started to exaggerate the story and spread bad rumors about him. Eventually, the rumor reached the department I belonged to. So I heard the police came? I'm divorced now, so I don't know much about it. What? You're divorced? Yeah, the bullying from my mother-in-law and my husband's abusive words were too much. I spoke in a slightly louder voice so that those around me could hear. The gossip-loving employees heard this and spread the rumor even further. It didn't take long for my ex-husband's boss to hear about it. You've got quite a lot of bad rumors going around. What are you talking about? I hate men who can't cherish their wives. And with such bad rumors going around, our reputation suffers too. So I decided to have you transferred. The transfer order given to my ex-husband was a harsh one. This place is... It was the branch office in the region with the worst performance. The area was called a landlocked island as there was no entertainment or anything of that sort around. You understand what being sent here means, right? Everything he had built up until now had crumbled, and there would be no chance of promotion in the future. He accepted the transfer order and moved to the countryside without being able to refuse. As for my ex-mother-in-law, she must have been shocked by her son's lowered reputation and the fact that they could no longer live together. She became a complete shut-in and eventually developed depression. It seemed she also had dementia as she frequently caused disturbances at home. My ex-father-in-law desperately took care of his deteriorated wife. Even if not related by blood, she is still an important family member. It was only natural that the ex-in-laws faced the consequences of their continuous harassment towards me. Now, my mother and I are living happily together. We even started gardening in our spacious yard. If I were still in that house, I would never have found such a wonderful hobby. Having a hobby has invigorated me. My body, which was once worn out due to stress, is now healthy. I'm very happy to have cut ties with my ex-in-law's family.
Mom wants me to come back here for New Year's.
It was my first New Year after marriage, and my husband suddenly told me that. Although I expressed my desire to visit my own parents, my husband flatly refused. On top of that, my mother-in-law told me,
The bride lacks self-awareness. Such a lazy daughter-in-law.
She criticized me in such ways. My husband always takes his mom's side, no matter how much I try to talk to him about it. I've had enough. I can't stand playing this family game anymore. To avoid any further involvement with my in-laws ever again, I'm going to push them to the limit. My name is Tiara, and I'm 28 years old. I got married to Mark, whom I had been dating for 2 years. Our newlywed life is going smoothly. Since we both have full-time jobs, there's no uneven burden of household chores on either of us. I didn't want to be solely responsible for housework just because I'm a woman. So I made sure to actively involve my husband in it. Both our work and personal life are reasonably fulfilling. I'm also thinking about having children once things settle down a bit more. About a month after getting married, we were suddenly summoned by my in-laws. Well, summoned might be a slight exaggeration. At that time, I just thought we were invited to my husband's parents' house. Before getting married, I had gone to my in-laws to introduce myself, but I was too nervous to engage in a smooth conversation. Since we were invited this time, I hoped it could be an opportunity to get along better with my mother-in-law. With such light-hearted feelings, I headed to my in-laws' place. However, the reason for being summoned there was something unimaginable. Upon arriving at my in-laws' house, I was ushered into the living room. As soon as I sat down with my husband, my mother-in-law's voice flew out.
Tiara, what are you trying to do? Why don't you go make some tea?
I'm sorry. Caught off guard, my mind couldn't keep up in the heat of the moment. I found myself apologizing without much thought. I had assumed, perhaps mistakenly, that even though it was my in-laws' place, I would be treated as a guest. I wasn't expecting a lavish reception or anything, but I never imagined I would be taken advantage of like this.
Tiara, you're letting the tea steep too long. You're supposed to keep your teacups warm.
My mother-in-law constantly sighed while making me watch tea. Neither my father-in-law nor my husband said anything. If she has so many complaints, she could just do it herself. I admit I'm not great at making tea, but I don't want their standards forced on me. Then, on another day, just as I was planning to clean the house, my mother-in-law suddenly summoned me. In a hurry, when my husband and I rushed to my in-law's place, my mother-in-law was already in a foul mood.
Why didn't you bring even a single souvenir? Usually, when you're going to visit your parents-in-law's house, you should bring at least a piece of cake. Shouldn't you bring at least a small gift?
My mother-in-law gave me a sermon out of the blue. I didn't have any plans to go out today, and it was suddenly decided that I'd come over here.
I'm not asking you to make excuses. Wives these days are so quick to swear at their mother-in-laws, aren't they? Oh my God, my son got a really bad wife.
I'm sorry. Even if we engage in such conversations, my husband and, of course, not even my father-in-law come to my defense. It's not that I want them to protect me. I just wished for someone to stop my mother-in-law's one-sided and unreasonable behavior. After being lectured by my mother-in-law, I quietly spoke to my husband. Hey, could you tell your mom too, Mark? It was decided suddenly today that they would come, so preparing a souvenir was impossible from the start. Then my husband sighed, looking bothered.
Well, shouldn't you buy something in advance just in case you decide to go any time? I agree with my mom. Don't you think you're also at fault?
What came back from my husband were unjust words blaming me. Is he joking? Why does he have to take his mom's side, even in this? Of course, my impression of my husband dropped. Just after a few instances, I developed an aversion to my mother-in-law. After that, I was regularly summoned, and they would impose their way of doing things on me. When I go to my in-laws' house, I end up doing all the household chores. I prioritize my husband and in-laws in my actions. Independence Day, Thanksgiving, New Year's, etc. I always spend them at my in-laws' place. Honestly, it's at a level where I can't help but wonder, what era is this? Even I, who usually handles things well, have become quite afraid of going to my husband's parents' house. It was the first New Year's since we got married, and my husband said,
"Come back here for the New Year,"
he told me. Huh? Wait a minute. If that's the case, when will you visit my parents' house?
It might be a bit tough this time. Let's decide the plans after the New Year. Isn't that fine?
What's that about? We promised to visit each other's parents with the same frequency, didn't we? I couldn't help but get frustrated with my husband's carelessness. He responded with a reluctant tone.
Ugh, you can't be helped now, right?
Why are you sighing now? We made a clear promise a while ago. Yes, both my husband and I were the type who wanted to visit our own parents regularly. That's why we rented an apartment right in the middle of both our parents' homes. We decided to visit our respective parents with the same frequency. But when I checked, we had already been to my in-laws' house 6 times, while we've only visited my parents once. According to my husband, this time, he said we should stay at his parents' place from the last day of work until the 3rd day of the new year. I couldn't stand such nonsense. I demanded from my husband. I want to at least visit my parents' place sometime between January 1st and 3rd. Then my husband said,
"Ask my mom."
So I called my mother-in-law. When my mother-in-law answered the phone, she began saying something right away. "Tiara, you're in charge of the New Year's dishes, okay?" Understood, but on one of the days until the 3rd, I will definitely visit my parents' place, so please keep that in mind. I'm counting on you with that understanding. When I stated so clearly, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "Huh?" with a surprised and slightly outrageous voice. "What's that? I can't believe you put your own family first. You're not being a good enough daughter-in-law." She lectured me for an hour over the phone and I was exhausted. I complained to my husband about it.
Mom just wants you, Tiara, to be a good daughter-in-law for us. She often says she wants you to be a suitable daughter-in-law for our family.
He responded casually, and my husband's obtuse personality became another factor exhausting me. In the end, we spent the period from the end of the year until January 3rd at his parents' house.
It's your first New Year's after getting married, so prioritize your in-laws.
Reluctantly, I did just that as advised by my mother. During my stay at my in-laws, I worked like a maid. From preparing meals to cleaning the entire house, doing laundry, taking out the trash. I had to do everything on my own. If I asked my husband for help, "Tiara, this is a wife's job, okay? Mark is usually tired from work, so it's only natural to give him a break during the New Year's holiday, right? You're really thoughtless, huh?" I was scolded by her. I work as a full-time employee too, you know. Thanks to you, I couldn't rest at all during the New Year's holidays, you know. While I wanted to retort in my mind, I didn't want to stir up trouble during the New Year. It was the first year of marriage, so I forced myself to accept it. I managed to make it through New Year's at my in-laws' house. It wasn't until sometime after the New Year that I was able to show up at my parents' house.
I'm tired, so I'll be waiting at home.
Since my husband said something heartless, I ended up going to my parents' house alone. Around this time, my distrust towards my husband began to grow. And of course, there's my frustration with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, but more than that, it's my husband who doesn't take me seriously when I talk to him about it. I was fed up. Even after the New Year, my mother-in-law kept badgering me. When I started refusing to go to my in-laws' house, they started calling me every day. In the morning, I would wake up to about 10 missed calls already. Curious, I would return the calls, only to be greeted by my mother-in-law's furious ranting. "Finally awake? You lack awareness as a wife. Wake up at 5 a.m. every day and prepare a nutritious meal for Mark." Even if I come home a bit late due to overtime, I get scolded mercilessly. "Mark told me, didn't he? I can't believe you're a woman working overtime. A wife who doesn't come home earlier than her husband is disgusting. You should put your family first. This heartless daughter." I actually earn more than your son. In fact, I contribute more to our expenses. How many times I wanted to say that, but I managed to hold back and just replied with an insincere sure. Gradually, I stopped answering my mother-in-law's calls and started deleting voicemails without listening. This continued for about a year, and once again, the dreaded year-end arrived. As expected, my husband called me.
Mom insists you come back for the new year.
Pushed by him, I firmly told my husband this time, not this year, I can't endure it anymore. Not a maid, you know. Despite that, my husband grumbled unhappily.
Hey, Tiara, don't upset Mom, okay? You're my wife now that we're married. Just show a little consideration for my family relationships.
Huh? What's that? You're the one who hasn't even shown your face at my parents' house. Besides, I made plenty of effort to build a good relationship with your mother.
Mom's always mad at you because you haven't done it, right? Try a little harder.
Try a bit harder? His words made it seem like I was entirely at fault. In my trembling anger, my husband delivered the final blow.
Let me tell you something. My mom gets mad at me because you're a failure, okay? Do you understand?
At this moment, the dam I had barely held back finally burst. A failure? Am I at fault? I've been trying so hard to please your parents, putting up with so much for your sake. I took a deep breath and looked straight at my husband. I'll cut ties with your parents alone. I won't see your father and mother again. He seemed momentarily surprised, but perhaps he realized it was futile to say anything to me now. Surprisingly, he agreed easily.
Yeah, got it. It's totally fine. I'll spend New Year's alone.
Since then, the relationship with my husband has been tense. Conversations at home have significantly decreased, but honestly, I couldn't care less. This year, for the first time in a long time, I can spend the new year at my parents' house. That fact made me supremely happy. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mother asked me worriedly,
Tiara, is everything okay with Mark's parents? I can't help but worry.
It's fine. I made it clear to him that I won't be involved anymore.
Really? Well, if that's the case.
Despite her words, my mother seemed somewhat uneasy. She's naturally concerned about my strained relationship with my in-laws. While enjoying the comfort of my parents' home after a long time, I left the housework to my mother and relaxed. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Coming. I hastened to the entrance, and there stood my husband. Huh? Why? Caught off guard by the suddenness of the situation, I was left in a daze. My husband's expression seemed worn out. Although I invited him into the house, my husband remained silent. Growing impatient, I demanded an explanation. Hey, what's going on? Weren't you supposed to go to your parents' house today? Finally, my husband, with a heavy expression, slowly began to speak.
Mom said to bring you, Tiara.
Huh? Again? How persistent can a mother-in-law be? Despite my exasperation, I confronted my husband. I told you, I won't go to your parents' house anymore. You agreed when I said I'm cutting ties with them, right?
Yeah, but my mom's furious, saying it's absurd for a daughter-in-law not to visit.
I don't care. I can't endure your mother's harassment, nor can I ignore your indifferent father, so I won't meet them again. When I asserted this, my husband looked troubled.
That's a problem. Mom says you came into this family as a daughter-in-law, so think about your position a bit.
Daughter-in-law's position? Ridiculous in this day and age. Expressing my anger to my husband. Enough. I didn't marry you to be conveniently used by your parents. In-laws who only bully their daughter-in-law. A husband who doesn't protect his wife. I refuse to continue dealing with such heartless people. This might be the first time I spoke so forcefully. My husband is freaking out and shaking his shoulders, but this wasn't enough. The humiliation I endured until now was beyond comparison. If you continue to side with your mother, I will divorce you.
Divorce? You're kidding, right?
I'm serious. Just being a wife has caused me so much pain. With a husband who bows to his mother and offers no help, I will never be happy. I'm much better off being single. Seems like he finally realized I'm seriously considering divorce. My husband turned pale. Suddenly, he received a call, and his expression changed in shock. At that point, I knew immediately that the caller was my mother-in-law.
Hello?
My husband responded with a pitiful voice. My mother-in-law is screeching and screaming over the phone, and I can hear her clearly on the other end. Growing impatient with his flustered state, I took the phone from him. Oh, Mom, it's me. No matter how much my husband tries, I won't come to your place anymore.
Huh? Aren't you our daughter-in-law? I won't allow that.
My mother-in-law, not to be outdone, retorts. I retorted with more than twice the power. Daughter-in-law, seriously? Are you living in the Stone Age? It's the 21st century.
You're an insolent daughter-in-law. At least show up for family events.
No, thank you. My husband is free to go there, but I absolutely won't attend any family events. If you say anything more, I will divorce Mark.
This is outrageous. I won't allow it.
Feel free. I have no intention of dealing with you at all. Goodbye then. With that, I hung up the phone in frustration. Turning to my husband, I continued. This is how it is. As I said earlier, if you side with your mother, I will get a divorce. If you understand my opinion, treat me equally. I'll overlook it this time.
Yeah, okay. I'll choose you, Tiara.
My husband remained silent for a while, but eventually he made the decision to start anew with me. Since then, I haven't visited my in-laws, and my mother-in-law hasn't contacted us. Perhaps my husband reflected on his past actions. Now, he regularly visits my parents. Of course, my parents don't take advantage of him. They treat him with genuine affection, just like a real son. We'll likely face various challenges in the future, but I want to overcome them together, with a husband who chose me. I want to get over it, day by day. I'm glad to know that Tiara got to cut ties with her husband's parents-in-laws. I didn't know what would have happened to Tiara's husband, but I'm glad he reflected on his actions and are now visiting Tiara's parents as well. I hope Tiara and her husband will lead a happy life as a married couple. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.